others. A few quick introductions about me, who VEEAM is, for those few people that might not have heard us. Very quick product updates. We've just had some new stuff come out, so just in case any of you haven't heard of it, I'll cover that. Then going to go into a few design examples. So these are not case studies, they're not sort of any of the marketing massage general ones. These are real examples with actual customers that either myself or some of my other colleagues have put together. We'll finish off with a few tips and tricks. Again, these are some things I've discovered from doing many implementations of the product myself. Some of them are stuff that our support guys have come up with that you can use to make your deployment of the solution a little bit better. So, who's VEEAM? Has anyone here not heard of VEEAM? Well, we will be. Never mind. So, if you haven't, you'll be like this little guy.
V or VEEAM? What's the name of the company?
Official pronunciation, it's when it was formed, was VEEAM. However, a journalist mispronounced it, called it VEEAM once, and from then on the name kind of stuck, as I understand it. There are various different urban legends which tell the story. So, a few things you've probably seen. We're at many shows such as this one. You'll have seen people with flashy bouncy balls going around everywhere, and more importantly, the young ladies at the bottom who are pretty common feature at some of our shows. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me.
PhD Virtual got those green flashy balls, huh?
I know, but they don't work as well.
Not the flashy ball.
They didn't use green. I think they put red lights in them, and they look kind of rubbish. So, very quick product updates. Backup 6.5 went GA last week, and VEEAM 1 6.5 went GA yesterday. So this is absolutely hot off the press. Backup 6.5, you might well have seen this at VMworld or TechEd for the Microsoft side of things. 4 main features. Server 2012 support, along with the HDX support. That's Server 2012 as any part of the environment, whether that is as a part of the backup infrastructure itself, as a hypervisor, or as a client. Also, vSphere 5.1 support. Yes, I know VMware has got its own backup product in it, but it's not really quite scoped at the same sort of level. We also included 2 extra features. Again, these are sort of features that otherwise you might have to go out and buy, but we were generous and threw them in for free. And that's our Exchange Explorer, which allows a user to do email level recovery from an Exchange 2000 mailbox database. And it also allows an administrator to do a global e-discovery operation. So you can search an entire mailbox for an individual term, and either restore those out to message files or a PST file, or in certain cases directly back to the Exchange server. The final part of the VEEAM product set, our management pack for Ops Manager, I'd love to say was going available. In fact, it's not even really hidden out for stage yet. For those of you that are in System Center, it's looking good, what I've seen, and I hope to be able to tell you a little bit more about that at another time. As I say, the design examples that we went through, these are not marketing ones. Marketing have most definitely not approved these. They're customers that I've worked with, customers that my colleague Andy's worked with as well in Germany. And I thought about these ones of, what can you do with backup software that isn't a backup? Traditionally, people have done a backup software, they've done some backups, put them on a tape, put them in a safe, forgotten about them, until they had to do a restore and they realised that it's the wrong backup tape, and the tape was mislabelled and it all goes horribly wrong. But even when it does work, that backup is just sitting in a safe. All it is, it's a tick box of an insurance policy, really. And I thought about occasions where, well, you can actually, how can you make your backups work for you? Do a little bit more with them. First example of this was data center migration. This is from a major retail bank, a global bank, who had data centers around the world, most notoriously in Greece. And they decided that it was a very, very good idea to try and get their data centers out of Greece, knowing the stability of the problems that they've had there. And they were looking at various products to do it. They were going from different SAN manufacturers, so it's a heterogeneous environment there, so they couldn't use SAN replication. They didn't want to have to deploy anything into the virtual machines, more importantly. So some of the solutions which do great sort of block level replication within a VM are good, but you've got to install an agent in the VM. It's quite painful because they're only going to do this once. And they ended up using our replication product and consolidated about 3 or 4 data centers back to the UK using it. pre-patch testing. So Patch Tuesday comes around and your config manager guys have put together some great packages and everything's been tested in the QA department, and you go to apply those patches to production and something has occurred midway through the month. And what happened, when the server reboots, blue screens. Everyone blames the patch. If you use our Sure Backup feature, you can actually test a reboot effectively of a production virtual machine. And if you have had a problem, the classic one that our product marketing guys like to demonstrate with is if someone's damaged ntloader.exe, or there's been some disk corruption on some of the boot files that are only ever accessed as you do, we can test whether that's going to occur. You can simulate it. Sorry.
Is this also supported on a Hyper-V or is it
absolutely? Sorry, Sure Backup. Manual Sure Backup is. The automated testing, unfortunately, is not. So with I'm thinking with Hyper-V 3, the advent of the much better virtual switch connectivity should enable us to do that in a forthcoming release. Okay. I think the 6.5 was, we wanted to make sure customers with Server 2012 could get backups first, and it was slightly higher up on the priority, but I've certainly done myself an instant restore into an isolated switch, so you can just change the networking of an instantly restored virtual machine and test it that way. It's just not quite as automatic. That's the nice feature that we can do with this one. You can take backups more than once a day, because when we're running a backup, there's no agent in the virtual machine. Because there's no agent in the virtual machine, the only I/O stress that goes against it, apart from the underlying I/O of your production storage, is when we take and when we release that VMware snapshot. So throughout the duration of the backup, the virtual machine operates 100% as normal, which means that you don't have to back up overnight. You can actually start to back up a bit more during production hours. As a result, we've got a software company in the north of England who have got remote developers all over the world, and they've got a little local file server. And they were really, really concerned about backups for these guys, and they started to do backups every hour. And they take them every hour, and then every few hours they async those backups back to their head office. And that gives them a global sort of file recovery solution for these local developers. This is one that my colleague and I have both worked on. It's a very, very large German company, and they've got multiple stores all around the world, and they're using not only our backup solution but the replication part of it as well. 2 standalone hosts, and what they do is those hosts run a single line of business server for them. We replicate that line of business server between those standalone hosts, and then once it's replicated, we back it up. And the reason we back it up is because we can then instantly restore it. And they run their a pre-stage for their overnight maintenance jobs on this instantly restored copy, so that they know before they've tried to run the Oracle maintenance. Before they've actually tried to run that Oracle maintenance, they know whether it's going to work or not. If it doesn't work, then they can take steps to do so before it's changed any production data. In terms of going beyond the GUI, we've got PowerShell. I'd love to say at this point we've got RESTful API. We don't. It has been requested, and the more people that request it, the more likely it's going to be in. So, as with pretty much anything else within VEEAM, every single feature is user-driven. So, if there's something that you think you need, get on our forums and ask for it. The more people that ask, the quicker something goes in. It's pretty much the long and the short of it. So, this is an example from a cloud provider in Australia who used a combination of they were using vCloud Director, they had VMware's Orchestrator product involved, and they had some fairly good PowerShell scripting in place to enable user-driven backup and restore for virtual machines. So these, any of the infrastructure as a service machines that they provided for their customers, they could then choose when to back them up and, more importantly, when to restore them. Onto sort of the tips and tricks side of things, I'm going to cover sort of 4 areas. Looking at the storage, looking at the storage that you're backing up to is the most important bit. A little bit about the site. So once you scale out, the types of scale out environment that you can put us into. Continuity. So, well, how do you actually back VEEAM up? How do you protect VEEAM, and not only that, but how do you protect the backups that we take? And a little bit about the proxy considerations. This is to do really with the transport side on the VMware ones, but I'll try and cover a little bit of the Hyper-V side as well. So storage. Storage is the most, every time I see a customer having problems with their backups, it's because of storage. It's going to be the bottleneck because people buy cheap storage for their backups. They think, oh, it's only the backups, I can get away with buying this NAS that I got at the PC world, and then try to run production grade backups on it. When we do a reverse incremental, we actually do 3 times the I/O. For every source I/O, there's 3 times the I/O that occurs at the target, because you've got to not only write the data to the target, you've got to read the backup file to eject the rolled back data from when there's change blocks. So it can be quite intensive if you've got a customer running multiple reverse incremental jobs against even fairly good level storage. You'll see the IOPS go through the roof on it. So you've got to be really careful. If you're doing instant recoveries, I mean, an instant recovery is a very, very high random read I/O, which for most things is fine. But if you've deployed something like a data domain, which uses very heavy read I/O caching, so it's designed for a linear read stream. Basically, we flood the cache immediately, and the instant recovery is not particularly quick. So it's just one of those things you have to be aware of. If you're also doing a lot of those short backup operations, be careful when you're running them, because you've then got multiple instant restores concurrently running, so it's going to hit that storage. You need to really think about how you plan that storage. If you're going to use short backup, make sure the storage has got a little bit more horsepower in it. Dedupe itself is fantastic. If you're a bit conscious of space, you can save a bit. Currently, Microsoft have very kindly introduced deduplication into Server 2012, and it's really good, but it has got some drawbacks. If the amount of data it can process in a 24-hour period, I think, is by default scoped to around 1 terabyte of data. In terms of a backup, that's not really that much. Although you can run multiple deduplication jobs against multiple volumes, that means you've got to have multiple volumes for your backups. And the more volumes you have, the less deduplication there is between those volumes. So you may or may not actually end up saving that much space for it. However, for the smaller customers, it's a perfect solution. From a hardware point of view, you've got solutions like Exagrid, who do their dedupe in a slightly different way. It's actually a little bit closer to the Server 2012 way, in that you have a landing zone, and that landing zone is undeduped. So if you can get the full backup to sit in that landing zone before going off to the dedupe, you can run instant restores against it, because it is just regular disk. It's not having to rehydrate any data. From the proxy considerations, in terms of transport, you've got 3 options: direct SAN, hot add, and network. Direct SAN, I like. It's LAN free. It's also probably the fastest we can do. If you've got reasonable storage fabric, I've seen upwards of sort of 400 megabytes per second on a full backup of data going across that for one job. So you can imagine, that's a pretty heavy amount of data. But it only works with block storage, so you do need to have either a fibre channel or an iSCSI SAN. iSCSI has got its own few sets of problems. There's a few bits of tweaking you can do to set the auto-tune levels within iSCSI. And the big one I hear from customers is a risk of mounting a VMware volume to a Windows server. They're worried that Windows is going to try and bring those disks online and resignature them, and the whole world will essentially fall apart. There are a few ways you can mitigate this. When we set up a server as a proxy server, we automatically disable auto mount, and we also set the offline SAN policy, and those are the 2 things to really check. If you really want to go down the belt and braces route, you can restrict the disk management MMC to customers, so that only the absolute trusted, and not the office junior is going to suddenly go in, open up disk management and try and manually bring disks online, because that would be bad. The final way is, if your SAN supports it, and most SANs now do, you can specifically present your VMware disks to the host in a read-only mode. So even if they do try to bring them online, they can't do anything with it. Hot add proxies. Hot add proxies are very scalable. They're just VMs. In fact, they can be VMs running Windows 7. So for customers, again, who are license conscious, I recently deployed a scenario where they deployed 9 hot add proxies all on Windows 7 because they were going out into branch offices where they didn't have data center licensing on the hosts, so that worked pretty well. However, they've got a bit of additional overhead, so they can be a bit slower. You've got maybe an extra 100 seconds or so per virtual machine overhead sometimes, as it adds and removes the disks. So it's actually, manually changing the operations on the disk. If, again, for low density, it's not a problem, but if you're trying to back up 100 virtual machines in a job, well, that's a good few hours to the job that you're adding that you may not necessarily need to be adding if there's other transports available. And finally, the VDDK restrictions. The API that we use, particularly with NFS storage, appears to have some features that hopefully VMware are going to address at some point. Namely, you can get snapshots can take a very long time to release. It's the first known one, and you can get certain I/O stuns occurring in a couple of environments, which is fairly unpleasant most of the time. The workaround from VMware is to switch to the last mode, which is network. Network mode, on the face of it, is the slowest. But if you've got 10 gig Ethernet, or if you've got some of these all singing, all dancing InfiniBand type solutions, then you've got a serious amount of bandwidth going in and out of those hosts. Because it goes over the management network, if you put 10 gig on the management network for that, then you're going to have a very, very quick backup. This is one of my last little tips for direct SAN mode. The API produces a fair amount of logging. It's pretty verbose. And you can, in certain scenarios, get again, around a 2 to 3 minute pause of a big virtual machine where you've got lots of SAN lines presented to a host. You get a bit of a pause. However, if you're happy with the setup that you've got and it's relatively stable other than this slowness, you can apply this registry key to the main sort of VEEAM hive. I think it's HK local machine software VEEAM backup or something like that. I'll double check it afterwards. And set that to 1, restart the backup services, and essentially disables the VDDK logging, which means that your backups start going straight away. So if you've got a good stable deployment, then I see no reason why you shouldn't want to deploy this. Looking at the way you might design the whole solution. Traditionally, in version 6, we have a single backup server, and then multiple proxy servers writing to one or more repository servers. And that's fine for one site. But if you've got a multiple site implementation, you can just have that single backup server, but consider adding extra backup servers. The main reason being is that although the backup server is pitched as being just controlling the jobs, it is almost. There's a few little things that it's still central for. File level recovery is a big one, and for sure backup. To avoid networking headaches, you need to have the backup server on the same subnet as the virtual lab. So if you can do that by tweaking network routes and things like that, then go for it, but it's quite painful. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot easier to deploy multiple backup servers. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have multiple backup servers, because Enterprise Manager has got a lot better. So you can actually stop, start jobs, you can clone jobs, you can manage pretty much everything you would on a day-to-day basis. Even creation of new jobs. If you've got a good job template set up for a given backup server, do it straight through Enterprise Manager, you've still really got that single point of administration. Protecting VEEAM. A few years ago, there was a challenge level to this that we couldn't back ourselves up. And it's something we've taken a fair few steps to try and address. And it's led to what I think is the best kept secret in this particular release. That's the configuration backup option. In fact, most people hadn't realised that it's even in place until they suddenly see that the backups are being taken and stored on one of their repositories. And what it is, it literally dumps the config of a backup server onto the first repository, by default, every 10 minutes, I think. What it doesn't do, however, is back up any of the security credentials. We sort of ummed about whether we were going to do this in production and thought, actually, we didn't really want to be encrypting passwords into it. So what happens is that it scrapes all of the usernames that it needs, and then when you do a restore, it just gives you the list of your usernames and asks you to put passwords by them. So it's not that much of a pain point, and it also keeps the security people relatively happy. The other way you can do it is have the backup server as a virtual machine. Again, in configurations prior to version 6, this probably wasn't recommended. simply because it meant you couldn't use the direct SAM mode and things like that. But nowadays I actively advocate it, because not only can you back us up, but you can replicate us. If you've got a dual site setup, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't want to replicate your backup server along with the backups to the second site, which means if you lose a site, well, you've got the backup server and the backups ready to go. In terms of protecting our data, there's nothing really that we do built in. And I was reading a book on backups the other day, and they talk about one of the strongest things being the 3-2-1 rule. So a backup is not a backup until the following things have occurred. You've got 3 copies of it, 2 different types of media, and at least 1 other place. We can do the 3 copies, it's not a problem. 2 different types of media, well, don't back up to your production SAN. And 1 other place. That's the slightly trickier bit that we don't do natively. However, let's have this conversation in about 8 months' time and we'll see where we go. That's about it for the moment. Questions and answers with VEEAM if we've got time. And we've got plenty of time left.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but VEEAM's not that very VMware focused.
You're wrong. We probably put as much effort into the Microsoft stuff now.
Well, so start it off.
Start, absolutely, yes.
And obviously there's a much bigger emphasis on Microsoft nowadays.
Yeah.
When you're going out with customers, and do you see a much bigger move towards Hyper-V 3? And do you think it's going to...
I think it's too early to tell. My personal background is, I've only been working for VEEAM for about 18 months. Prior to that, I was infrastructure architect for Deloitte, so I was in end user space myself. And I was VMware sort of right to the core, but I've slowly sort of grown away from it and realised, like as a lot of customers, that Hyper-V it's hit that good enough stage. Unless you want there's a specific reason you need to be running VMware. It's harder and harder to justify that decision to managers as the why am I going with Hyper-V?
Actually, can we ask people in the room? If you were doing a greenfield installation, doesn't matter what for, let's say for VDI,